Welcome to the Fierce Kind Mama of Multiples podcast. This podcast is for anyone raising multiples, twins, triplets, or more. I speak to inspiring parents of multiples who have healed from unexpected pregnancies and birthing experiences and who candidly share the highs and lows of raising multiples. I also speak to the professionals that work with multiple birth families. Together, we cover the practicalities of raising more than one baby at a time, as well as enhancing the emotional well-being of caregivers and children alike. Come join us as we laugh, cry, and share our personal and professional wisdom on all things multiples. I'm your host, Dr. Christina Kavetsa, and I am a fierce, kind mama of multiples. Welcome to the second episode of Season 2. I feel like it's been a while because for those of you that have listened to earlier episodes, you will know that we had a season break while I was overseas with my boys visiting relatives in Canada. And I haven't had the chance yet to let you know that we survived the long-haul flights between Australia and Canada. Although when we arrived back in Australia, I swore that I would never fly for that long ever again. We flew from Vancouver to Sydney, which was an overnight flight of about 15 hours. None of us slept very well at all. And then upon arrival, we had to get our suitcases, clear customs, drop the suitcases off again, and catch a shuttle to another terminal to board another flight to Melbourne. It was extremely exhausting, but I'm so proud of my boys as they handled it a lot better than I anticipated they would. I do think if we could have broken up the flight a bit by staying in another city for a night or two, that might have been better. But I suppose there is something to be said for just getting on with things and not prolonging pain, kind of like when you rip off a Band-Aid in one quick motion. All in all, though, I am so grateful that I got to see my family after all these years, and that my boys got to spend time with their family too. They absolutely loved Canada, which was so nice. I also wanted to share with you some feedback that I received about this podcast. This comes from Emma, a mother of twins. She writes, "Wow, I've just listened to the first episode of your podcast. Just about everything you have said mimics my life currently with identical twin boys. I'm so excited to keep listening and to learn and grow. Thank you so much for this. Exactly what I need right now." Thank you, Emma, for this feedback. I'm so glad that the podcast resonates with your experience, as I hope it will for others too. I absolutely love hearing from listeners, and all feedback is welcome. So please don't be shy. Please write to me. Tell me what you love, what you didn't, what you want more of, what you want less of, because ultimately this podcast is for you and other parents like you. So feel free to get in touch at any time. You can email me at hello@fiercekindmama.com. Finally, on today's episode, I have an exciting announcement that I'll share with you later on in the episode, so please stay tuned for that. Today, I'm joined by psychologist and body confidence coach, Rebecca Pearce. She helps women create a healthy relationship with their bodies so they can feel empowered, live authentically, break free from diet culture and body shame, and become healthy role models for the next generation. In this episode, we discuss how women can have a healthy relationship with their bodies after a multiple birth pregnancy, and how as mothers, we can instill body confidence in our children. I hope you enjoy this conversation. So I'd love to welcome on today's episode, Rebecca Pearce. Rebecca, so nice to have you here.
It's so nice to be here. Thank you for having me.
I'd love for you to start off by telling us a bit about yourself and the work that you do.
Yeah, sure. So I'm a psychologist and I'm a body confidence coach. So I've been working in the field for a little over 2 decades now. And I started working with eating disorders, primarily young girls who were suffering in that sphere. And I fell in love with that work. And so I've really integrated into my private practice from then on. I've always worked with that client cohort, and I have a real passion to help women, particularly mums, heal and recover from eating disorders, but also those who have had difficult relationships with their bodies. So, yeah.
Lovely. Thank you. That sounds like such a nice experience that you've had starting with younger women or younger girls, I should say, and then moving on towards mothers. How did that kind of progress?
Yeah, I think, well, with my age, so it's also a personal thing as well. So as I grew and I became a mother myself, I realised that the challenges that women across the ages have are really unique. So I think that at each of our transitional phases through womanhood, our bodies change. And with that, we have to transition and get used to different aspects of our body and learn to relate to our bodies in different ways. So, yeah, as I grew and I developed in my own way and my relationship with my body changed along the way, I think my understanding and my knowledge deepened in terms of how that can change across the lifespan.
Yeah, I love that. I think that it is an important point to make that we evolve, on our own journey through life and our own experiences. And that can shape, I guess, the work that we do too.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yeah. So what led you to want to work in this area initially? What intrigued you about working with people with eating disorders?
Yeah. So when I was younger, I was heavily involved in ballet and dance. As we know, that can be fraught with lots of body image issues, lots of pressure to maintain a particular physique. There can be a lot of diet culture in that area and in that industry. So I was first exposed to the idea of being thin for that particular purpose when I recall maybe 10 years of age. One of my good ballet friends was told to go on a celery diet. And I just remember feeling mortified for her and confused, and she was a beautiful dancer and I really admired her. And I remember feeling, I just didn't understand that whole concept of what is this diet thing that you're talking about. And I didn't grow up in a family or a culture that did diet. And so that kind of and then it just unraveled from there. Lots of my friends had struggles with their body image as I was growing up, and also then I was heavily involved in table tennis as a sport as well, and so there were certain pressures to maintain weight and things like that as well. So that's where I think my questioning of why are we pressured to look a certain way when these dancers and these performers and these athletes are perfectly capable, whether they're in larger bodies or smaller bodies, it actually didn't really matter to my eye. And so then I kind of started a bit of a crusade from there. Yeah.
Wow. That experience of being young and having a friend who's being told to go on a celery diet, like I imagine that, for you, not having had that kind of upbringing where there was a focus on weight and that kind of thing, that would have been quite confusing. But I'm also, when you were speaking, I thought I hadn't even realized, I had heard obviously in ballet and a certain dance, the pressure to be a certain body shape, maybe, or a certain weight. I hadn't realized though with table tennis that was a thing as well, that there was pressure. Could you speak to a bit about that experience?
Yeah, not so much. It definitely wasn't so much as gymnastics or ballet or anything like that, but it was mentioned for people who were in larger bodies. There was certainly a pressure to trim down, to lose weight, to eat a certain way. But all along, the idea of making all bodies look a certain way is unsustainable and unachievable. So, as I'm sure we'll talk a little bit about, the whole you need to lose weight and be this ideal weight is not ideal for all bodies. So bodies can perform and function in completely unique and wonderful ways regardless of their shape. So I think in the field of table tennis it wasn't so prevalent, but there was certainly the assumption that if you did fit into this, this ideal weight range, that you're going to perform better. But that wasn't probably necessarily the case. Yeah.
Yes. Okay. I understand that link that you're making there with body size and shape with ability. And I suppose that's a misconception that many people would have. And I think that anyone who watches TV or spends any time on social media, that we would know that diet culture and body shaming is particularly prevalent amongst women. What do you see are the reasons that we as women generally feel pressure to change or fix our bodies?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's so loaded, and I've thought a lot about this. And it's a question I do get asked a lot. So I think there's pressure from the time we're very young children. We see certain ideals in the media, the shop fronts, the magazines, other women make comments about their own bodies. So we grow up in a culture that values thinness and physical appearance, and there's a lot of pressure to look a certain way through our social media. That's certainly something, and I know that we've mentioned that in the past as well. Peer pressure. Girls grow up and sometimes there can be a little bit of competitiveness around looking a certain way and being a certain way, and yeah, so there's social and cultural norms are a big thing. So we have been going through a long period of time now where thinness is idealized to some degree, and that's filtered down through everything. And the other thing that I always note is the idea that if you want to feel good, you need to look a certain way, or you need to change your physical appearance in some way. So there's this association between if you wear this particular makeup or this particular dress or this particular diet or this particular drink, or it's going to change the way you feel from the inside. And I think many of us are yearning for something more or something to change internally. And so we look to those external sources of things that we might be able to change. So we're kind of fed that belief that happiness comes from the outside in rather than the inside out. So, yeah.
Yeah, what an important message. And I think, when you were speaking, I was thinking of two things: advertising and patriarchy.
Yeah.
And I suppose a lot of the advertising, even if I think about when I was young, the messages around, if you look this way, you're going to feel good. Just in terms of selling products, there's a beautiful woman wearing maybe nice clothes, makeup and hair is perfect. And then she gets the things that she wants in life. She gets the happiness, this product will help. It'll help you look that way, and it'll help you feel that way. I feel like I've been bombarded with a lot of that kind of advertising. So I wonder about that, and how we can break free from that. But I also think about the other thing I mentioned, patriarchy. I feel as though a lot of us are encouraged to live up to some impossible standard. And I wonder if we could speak a bit about that too, that almost there being a target that is imposed upon us, but that we also impose on each other because we're socialized in this patriarchal kind of culture. And how do we break free from that?
It's a great question. So I think I mentioned the inside out, the outside in. I think we have been fed those messages for a very long time to look externally for our sources of self-worth. I think, how do we break free from that? One of the main things that I work with women around is figuring out what they do value, what makes them feel good, what does their bodies need. So it's really about empowering women to start questioning those messages that we've always been fed from those advertising agencies, all the honchos, the head honchos, the patriarchy. We've just absorbed this, and we do it because we're not aware of the damage that it's been doing to us over the decades. So I think now there's a movement where we can actually stop and go, why do I actually believe that? Who told me that? At what point did I start thinking my body should be self-criticized and shamed and put into a box that it doesn't belong in, changed, prodded, poked? Why should I change? And I think what we can do about that is start to actually look at our uniqueness and our differences and our strengths, and what can our body do? What can it actually do? What does it do every day? We birth babies. You look at the women you work with, amazing. this needs to be celebrated. And we get up every morning and our bodies circulate blood and digest food, and we're more than just this physical appearance that we've been led to believe is our worth and our value. So I think I work deeply around that and women's beliefs around just starting to understand where those ideas came from, where those thoughts came from, what do they actually really think? Because sometimes they haven't really pulled them apart and actually looked at it from that perspective as well.
Yeah. So part of it, from what I understand what you're saying, and taking that critical eye, looking at things with a critical eye and kind of dissecting and being curious as to what is this message that I'm seeing on social media or on the TV or on the screen? What are they trying to sell me? What are they trying to show me? And maybe having a bit of that critical eye around understanding that that might be a tactic, an advertising tactic, but I don't necessarily need to buy into it. I don't necessarily need to define my value based on how I look because of what I see on social media or on TV or that kind of thing. Is that kind of what? Yeah.
And how are these limiting beliefs disempowering me in my life and distracting me from what's most important? Like, if you really talk to women, and most of the women I talk to, they would agree that their looks are not the most important thing. But it can be very fear-provoking to step away from that because they often think, well, if I focus on other things, does that mean I'm going to let myself go? Does that mean I'm going to be judged? Does that mean I'm going to look bad? What's going to happen if I don't pay attention to what I look like? But it's not one or the other. We can have, there can be balance. And those limiting beliefs around tying our self-worth into our appearance, like I said before, it distracts us from all the other things that we can influence in our world. And what are the things that really genuinely bring us joy and happiness and freedom? And what's the legacy that we want to leave? Like, do we want to leave a legacy that says, oh, she had, she was really thin her entire life, or she maintained her body shape, or she was amazing? That's not going to happen. People are going to remember us for the things that we did, the mind that we had, the attributes and the energy that we brought. So, yeah.
Sorry to interrupt the conversation. I promise we'll get back to it real soon. But in the meantime, I have some exciting news that I'd love to share with you. I will be hosting a webinar very soon that I know will be of interest to many of you listening. Did you know that the single most common factor that changes the dynamic of a couple and affects their relationship satisfaction is the birth of their first child? Throw multiple babies into the mix, and it is no surprise that many couples struggle to maintain their bond and intimacy. But what if there was a way to rekindle the love and connection you once had? We often spend a lot of time baby-proofing our home when our babies start crawling and walking, but what about baby-proofing your relationship? If you are a soon-to-be or current parent of multiples, and you want to maintain or strengthen the relationship you have with your partner, then my webinar will be right up your alley. You can find all the details at my website, fiercekindmama.com/workshop. Don't worry, I'll put those details in the show notes too. Places are limited and the live webinar will take place on Monday the 4th of September, so get in early to avoid missing out. And please don't worry if you can't attend live. There will be a recording. If you know anyone else that would be interested in this webinar, feel free to share the details with them too. I can't wait to see you there. Yeah, absolutely. I love that. I think that, the distinction between, as you said, how your body looks versus what it does for you is such an important one to remember. What does my body actually do? What am I capable of doing and being? And the focus on that more as to, how am I acting? How am I being rather than how do I look? I think the other thing that came to mind when you were speaking too is I recall hearing, I guess, messages from different parts, different people, even when I was younger, around attracting a partner. And you're not going to find someone if you look a certain way. You need to be thin, you need to be pretty, whatever that is, whatever the dominant message is around what that looks like at the time. But almost like if you aren't those things, then you're going to be alone and unhappy for the rest of your life.
Mm.
Do you come across that at all in your work, that kind of thinking?
I do. I think when the preoccupation is around the way the partner looks in the relationship, I think the relationship has lots of struggles. So I think when women are, particularly young women, and we often discuss around, so pre-partnered, I think we often discuss the idea that if you do attract a mate and you believe that they are attracted to you because of how you look, then you'll forever feel pressured and you'll forever be swimming upstream trying to maintain and preserve that particular style of beauty that you think your partner is attracted to. So focusing on attracting a mate that is genuinely connected to who you are as a person is going to be far easier in the long run. Yes, they're going to think you're attractive as well because that's an important ingredient. But if it's the only thing, then you're going to be constantly worried that what happens when I get a little bit saggier or a little bit bigger or a little bit older or all of those things. And there's this constant fear. And this is where I think some women do get into that cycle of, to keep my mate, I need to do all the things to keep myself looking youthful or refreshed or how I used to be. And I think I spoke a little bit before about the transition, and this is such a big thing with women, is learning to transition with ease and flow into each part of their life, acknowledging that I'm not going to be the same every decade, and nor should I be. This is natural, and this is, it's biological. It's what we're designed to do. And it's okay. Yeah.
Yeah. And as you were speaking, the first thought that came to my mind was the transition through motherhood is such a big one. And obviously, as you know, the area that I'm working in is with mothers of multiples. And there can be, I suppose, a lot of concern when a woman finds out. So in the beginning, when a woman finds out she's pregnant with multiples, sometimes there can be a preoccupation or a worry. How's that going to change my body? How much weight am I going to put on? I'm going to be carrying more than one baby. So it must mean I'm going to get really big. And there can be a lot of focus on that, a lot of fear and worry. I wonder if you can speak to that aspect and what women can do to maybe ease some of those concerns.
Yeah, I think I would be coming back to the idea of what is my mindset and what is helpful during this process? What are the most important things? What is my body doing? Like, whoa, all the things. This woman's body is literally growing a baby, 2 babies, multiple babies. And what is that actually looking like? What is it doing? What is happening inside? And really focus on how can I nourish and nurture and start to create that relationship with my babies through my body. So sometimes women can feel like it can be challenging to treat their body with compassion. It can be challenging to nurture their body because they might have a love-hate relationship with their body and wish it was something else, or wish it could do something else or be something else. And so some of the steps that you would be taking towards developing that relationship is seeing it as a relationship. How do I want to be in this relationship with this body that I'm going to have my entire being? It's my vehicle for life. It's my soul vehicle. It's going to take me around to all these places. And then when you're looking at growing babies in your body, if I think it's a beautiful start to that relationship and that connection with your children is to start thinking about how do I want to nurture and nourish my being so that they can then be the best that they can be. And also the other thing that's really important, that we're already starting to model that behaviour, even though they're still in the womb, when they come out and when they start growing and when they're, you want to already have that relationship with your body around what it can do and what it's doing every day, and that amazing idea of it being a vehicle so that you can be a great role model for your children so that they then learn how to do that for themselves. So for me, it's really shifting that focus completely away from, oh my gosh, I'm never going to look the same. I'm going to have stretch marks. Who knows what's going to happen. And some of that is definitely true and it's a reality. But do I want that to be my priority during this really important phase of my life?
Yeah. And I think what you said there was so important around the relationship you want to have with your body, as if it is kind of like another person, because I think that for me, that really highlights how I'd want to respond, how I'd want to treat someone else. If I'm treating my body as if it's another person that I love and care for, would I want to be cruel and unkind to them? Would I want to judge them harshly? Would I want to speak about them in a negative way? No, I wouldn't, and I think that that's the challenge for us, isn't it, as women, is maybe some of that self-talk or that inner critic, that voice that might come up occasionally when we look at our bodies and see how they've changed and maybe we're unhappy with that. But it's how would I respond to, as if it's another person? Would I say this stuff that I'm saying to myself? Probably not. Unless I want to be really unkind and cruel, right? Which most of us don't want that kind of relationship with anyone.
No.
Yeah.
And that's such a helpful tool to use. I think that, actually stepping back and going, yeah, what did I just say to myself? How can I get ahead in life? How is that going to support me and my mission, whatever that might be, or my day? Yeah. And some of the words and the voices and the self-criticism that women do have in their head, once they start to raise that awareness, that internal awareness, it can stop them in their tracks. Like, what am I actually saying to myself? Like, that is actually super mean. So, yeah.
Yeah. And is it a similar process if, after giving birth, a woman is then looking at her body and kind of unhappy with the changes that has occurred? Is it a similar kind of process that she needs to go through with recognizing what her body has accomplished and achieved, with the pregnancy and the multiple birth pregnancy? Or is there something else, do you think, that can help here too?
I think there is a misconception. I think many women realize it's a misconception at some level that our bodies can and should go back to what they used to be. I don't know many women whose bodies do that. I think it's very natural and very normal for bodies to be really different. Maybe just a little bit different. Maybe vastly different. Our bodies might do different things after we've given birth and look different. And I think that there's a certain element of practicing that acceptance of, with transition comes change, and how can I use my body in a different way, or how can I accommodate the changes and the shifts? And it can take time. And I think that one step at a time, I think the process of creating that new relationship with your body is actually seeing it as a new relationship, that I'm a different person now because I have this new identity, I have this new lifestyle, I have these new human beings in my life, I have a new body as well. So what do I need to do differently? And that can take a little bit of time and patience. And I think the self-compassion, is really valuable here. Actually say, you've been through a lot now. It's going to take a little bit of time to get used to these new changes. Let's not do anything drastic. Going back to basics is always something that is really important. And the basics, I'm meaning nourish, find out, know what actually feels good to your body in terms of food, making sure you're drinking lots of water, you're doing exercise that suits you, that you enjoy, moving our bodies, being active, being social, sleep. So, yeah, and so sometimes those really tangible things can help us feel a little bit more stable during this tumultuous time and learn to accept and get used to those changes and that transition.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. And I think when you were talking too about that self-talk that goes on in our heads, I also wondered about the way we speak with each other as women. And, I really believe in women creating change from within, but in order to have a wider impact on people and society at large, what can women do or say to help empower one another and stop, the yo-yo dieting, the constant focus on appearance, the body shaming, all of that?
Yeah. I think one of the most powerful things you can do is focus on how you speak about your body and be a good role model. I think gently challenging or picking up on that external self-criticism that women are very good at. Oh my God, I look so fat in this, or this looks disgusting, or I'm this, or I'm that. Gently and kindly just saying, that's not how I see you. How does that actually make you feel when you speak like that? That's really mean. You would never say that to me. Don't say that to you. So just kind of starting that conversation around, and it comes back to that raising awareness of what have we been conditioned to do all of our lives? It's just so normal for women to speak like that about themselves. It's so normal in our society to criticize and put ourselves down and shame ourselves. And as you said before, we would never do that to a friend. So actually being that friend and saying, that's not okay. We don't have to speak about our bodies like that. Yeah. The other thing I notice is that it can be quite a compliment. Sometimes we'll say, oh my gosh, you look amazing. Have you lost weight? And I would just really encourage not to do that because it just insinuates that you look amazing because you've lost weight. So we almost need to kind of drop that because, have you lost weight off the end and kind of sidestep it and be, that colour looks great on you, that cut of dress, your skin is glowing, your hair is glowing. If you're wanting to make comments because a friend genuinely looks amazing, try and steer clear from that weight, but using weight as a compliment or as a tool, because then the preoccupation kind of gets shone onto that.
I think that's a really important point. And I was reminded when you were speaking of my experience after having given birth. I had a complicated pregnancy in the end. I was very swollen and puffy near the end due to having preeclampsia and HELLP syndrome. And after the babies were born, some of that weight naturally just came off. I wasn't actually doing anything about it necessarily or targeting that. It's just kind of naturally that puffiness kind of came down. And I remember some people saying, oh, wow, you've lost so much weight. And it was interesting because at the time, what I really would have preferred people do is kind of ask me how I was going.
Yeah. How are you feeling?
How was I feeling? Yeah. And it's such a huge focus. We tend to, especially after childbirth too, I think there's a lot of focus on, have you lost the baby weight or how you look? And rather than how are you going? How are you feeling? How are you coping with the demands of raising babies, with the lack of sleep, with the exhaustion, with any of the challenges you might be experiencing? So I think that's a lovely point to make, is rather than focus on someone's appearance, let's just see how they're going. Yeah. And I know a big part of your mission is for women to be good role models for future generations. And so I'm wondering, because as mothers, we play such a huge role in educating our children. What do you see are the important messages that mothers can convey to their children about their own bodies?
I think that we can teach our kids to have good body image in so many ways, sharing meals, positive emotions around meals, seeing food as a source of nourishment, educating children around, the protein's good for your muscles and carbs are good for your brain and, nutrients and vitamins, and just having that natural dialogue with your kids around what is this food and water doing in my wonderful, amazing body, talking about the good things that your body does. I'm feeling really energized today. I've gone out, I've had a little walk. It felt really good to get the sun on my skin, rather than that I've hit the gym and I'm going to lose X amount of kilos, look at my stomach muscles or whatever, So yeah, I think being a good role model is about that relationship once again. How do I nourish and how do I nurture my body? What feels good to my body? Because that's very unique. and teaching our children that what might feel good to some people might not feel good for you. So you might have a child that loves running and loves fruit and doesn't eat too much meat. And then you could have another child that's completely different, who prefers kind of chilling out and gentle exercise and who's a bit of a, vegetarian or whatever. It's about teaching your children to listen to their bodies and tune into those feelings and those experiences. How does that make you feel? Where do you feel that in your body? And so you're teaching them how to have a good relationship with their body and be really in tune with it from the start. Yeah.
I love that. And I love that you also spoke about recognizing that children are different. So as parents of multiples, we often have to think about that each one of our babies or our children has an individual need, and they may be different. Even if they are identical twins or multiples, they may actually be different and they may have different needs. We need to be conscious of that. And also, when you were speaking, because we've been focusing a little bit on this idea of weight sometimes being the central focus in people's minds. I've got to lose a certain amount of weight. I've got to think about that and exercise and diet. And I know that some listeners may be wondering about that sometimes there is a place for calorie restriction and exercise, in the sense of if one is told that their health is at risk, that they may experience some kind of complication if they don't start losing weight or lose some weight. And of course, we know that exercise is good for us on some level too, right? For our physical and mental health. So how do we know when we're overdoing it? Like, how do we know when we're no longer having a healthy relationship with our bodies?
And when we need to look after it a little bit more, or do what we need to do for
exactly. Like, when do we know that we may need to diet and exercise, that might actually be important? We actually do need to do that versus, actually we're overdoing it. This isn't necessary anymore.
Yeah, I think we know because of how we feel when we're doing those things. I think that there is a tipping point where, like you said, we can overdo it and it can become quite obsessive or preoccupied, or there's pressure. We're driven to do these things out of desire to look a certain way or be a certain way, and we're focused on the outcome. And so there's those perfectionistic tendencies or those obsessive kind of tendencies kind of rear up, and we're really become quite preoccupied and focused on the outcome rather than that sustainability and compassionate approach. And this feels good and sustainable, and I'm not pushing myself to fit into a certain mold that is going to be unsustainable in the end. So this is one of the biggest issues with diets, is that diets are focused on an outcome. Or if someone says you need to lose X amount of weight to be healthy, that is not entirely true, because we can hit other health milestones such as blood pressure, cholesterol. We can reduce those things by being compassionate and kind and taking our time in adjusting into a healthy lifestyle. Even if we're not particularly reaching that weight milestone, we might hit all the other milestones. So our sleep becomes a little bit better, our eating becomes better, all of those things fit into place. So I think there is balance in your approach, but slowly is definitely better and more sustainable, and finding things that feel good to you is really important. When people go on diets, you'll often hear them say, I've just got to do this for 30 days, or I've just got to do this. We know that that's not going to be sustainable. We need to do this for life, and we need to find ways of, incorporating those healthful practices into our everyday life.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I love that. I think that it is about a healthy relationship again with one's body, with how we view exercise, and not obsessing about certain aspects like a number on the scale. Yeah. In terms of practically speaking on everyday level, how do we know when we have a healthy relationship with our body? Like, what can women expect to notice about themselves when they no longer define their worth based on how they look? And how might that change then how they live out their life?
The immediate word that comes to my mind is the power of the physical appearance, or the connection that you have with worth and physical appearance gets neutralized. So the body becomes a neutral vehicle with which we live our lives. So it becomes something that we do, we maintain, we look after, we nurture, we care for, so we can do the things that we want to do to make our soul sing. So I think that that's what having a healthy relationship with your body is truly about, and it's about having the freedom to live your life in a vehicle that you know you're looking after.
Yeah, right. I love that. I love that. I think that's really a nice way for us to maybe end this conversation. But before we do, I'd love for you, Rebecca, to just tell us where people can find out more about you and the work that you do in body confidence coaching, and what that kind of even looks like for people, what that might be like if they decide they want to work with you.
Yeah, sure. So I'm in the process of updating all of my information, as mentioned. So we might have to put all of that stuff into the show notes.
Absolutely.
But if you do Google Rebecca Pearce, psychologist and body confidence coach, you'll be able to find me there.
Definitely. Thank you so much, Rebecca. We will definitely include the information in the show notes to prepare that for when this episode is released. Lovely, Rebecca. It was so nice to chat with you today. Thank you so much for being here.
It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for having me.
Thanks for listening to today's episode. If you like what you've heard, then please follow and leave a review so that other expectant and current parents of multiples like yourself can find this podcast and the valuable information it contains. I'd be so very grateful if you left a review and shared this with anyone you think could benefit from listening. If you have a particular topic you'd like me to cover on this podcast, feel free to reach out to me via my website, fiercekindmama.com. New episodes are released every second Wednesday, so I'll see you back here real soon. Any advice and information in this podcast is general only and has been prepared without taking into account your particular circumstances and needs. For tailored, individualized advice, please consult with a qualified professional.